Welcome back to Humans in the Loop. Today's episode features a guest who, in terms of ideas per minute, might just be unparalleled. Alex Komoroske spent 13 years rising through the ranks of the Google product team before heading up corporate strategy at Stripe. He's since gone on to found his own company, Common Tools, which is focused on enabling decentralized technologies, the ethos of which you can best understand through the Resonant Computing Manifesto, something he co-authored, which outlines 5 key principles for a better type of technology that we could be building. Thankfully, Alex is also full of life and fun and doesn't take himself too seriously, which always makes for a lively and interesting conversation. So I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, this is Alex Komoroske. Okay, here we are. Alex, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Just to set the scene here a little bit, what do you think people need to know about you and your story, your experience, to understand your perspective on tech?
I think so Stephen Levy wrote this book in the 80s about the hacker ethic. I read it in college, and actually my undergraduate thesis was in the emergent power dynamics of Wikipedia's user community. I wrote a bunch of term papers on discourse on the internet and what modalities lead to high quality convergent pro-social results and stuff. And I think I am very much in that hacker ethic vibe. I'm an idealist who also is very pragmatic, but like I need to do what I can to make the world a better place in a way that many people would agree is better. And I'm very much of the tech industry. Like I've been in the tech industry my whole life, and I've become pretty disillusioned with it because we lost that idealism. It's all like in the last 10 years, it's become like kind of the cynical extraction phase. And if you steep in cynicism, you become like a nihilist. And at that point you say, well, whatever, nothing matters. I might as well do the thing that, is good for me. And I feel like tech has so much potential to create so much amazing pro-social outcomes for society. And we kind of just lost it in the tech industry at late stage of this last era. And now with large language models being so transformative, this is the reboot moment. This is the time where we have to decide, are we going to continue the slide into cynicism and nihilism, or are we going to rediscover and come home to the hacker ethic and this idealism?
And that hacker ethic, like there's part of me is interested in the idea that, you have this hacker ethic, this idealism, and then you had a pretty long career at Google, at Stripe, in these kind of bigger tech settings. So did you experience in those organizations like that hacker ethic at all realized, or was it kind of disillusionment from day one?
No, I think it was when I joined, I was an intern in 2007 at Google, and it was like the most wondrous place in the world. And even then was past its glory days, kind of like that was already on the downswing if you talk to the people who've been from the beginning. But it was so earnest. It was really just this positive sum framing of like, what is the most value we can create for society? What is the thing that's audacious, but in a way that is good, like everyone can agree is good for society. It was really, truly, deeply embedded. And it didn't, over time, it just started fading away in the whole industry. This is not as specific to Google or whatever. It's just, I think we got to the late stage dynamics of like, whatever, there's like 4 or 5 big aggregators that have carved up basically every minute of consumer attention. And now I guess we're just in the extraction phase. So like it absolutely fundamentally had it in a way that I found it was like flying, because you had the benefits of the scrappiness of a startup and the ability to make decisions quickly and emergently. You had the benefit of like a academic kind of environment. Let's do it the right way. What is the right way of doing this problem or solving this interesting thing that, we're going to grow into? And you also had the benefits of a big company of like knowing that, you were getting a paycheck as long as you didn't do something egregious or something. And that created just the most amazing environment for doing stuff, for living your ideals, having a great job that paid well at the same time. It was just the dream, absolute dream. And Google, it's not like Google ever lost it on a single moment. It was just a long, slow slide. And it was, again, timed with the rest of the industry was also in this cynical slide.
Yeah, I guess that slide and that drift, which I definitely agree with you on. What's your assessment of why that has happened? Like, is that just related to this stage of these technologies? Is it something to do with the people? Like, yeah, what are the dynamics that allows that kind of ethical stance to
I don't
decide?
think this is specific to tech, actually. I think everywhere you look in the last 15 years or something in society, we have a problem, an emergent problem. And this is hollowness. So there's the difference between hollowness and resonance. Something that's hollow leaves you feeling regret. Something that's resonant leaves you feeling nourished. They look superficially very similar, but they're fundamentally different. And modern society and all these kind of technocratic approaches that we have to optimization are really good at creating hollow things, and they're very bad at creating resonant things. And tech is an amplifier. It multiplies whatever you apply it to. And now with LLMs, that turbocharges it by 100x. And so it's more important than ever before. The things we apply it to are resonant. So like the reason no one picks hollowness, that's not a thing that everyone's like, let's make this thing hollow. It's an optimization ratchet. What happens when you're optimizing something? Optimization is optimizing for what? There's an implied question there. And the answer is number go up. I don't know, weekly active users or like engagement or whatever. So when you optimize for that, you lose this resonance in a way that isn't obvious. And so because optimization has been presented, I think throughout society as an unalloyed good, there's no downside. It's simply do it as much as you can. By not having it in balance with this resonance that we lose, this wholeness, this nourishing quality of what we want to want, not just what we want, we're left with this thing that's quite hollow. And I think that's true across all of business. I think it's true across politics. I think it's true across society. And like that to me is a defining characteristic of the modern society. The thing that we are missing is resonance. And we're living in a hollowed out world, and it's optimized to hell. It's optimized and also not worth it, to what end?
Yeah. We'll come back to this word resonance in a minute, because I know that plays an important role in some of your work. But I want to just like understand. So you mentioned 2007, you intern at Google. It sounds like this dream job for you, the mix of idealism, steady paycheck, the resources behind you to have
steady, very nice paycheck. It was not just a steady paycheck. It was also like, you're paying me how much?
Yeah.
Just
healthy paycheck. So, and you spent, as I understand it, a decade or so at Google and then went on to Stripe. And so, as you say, there's no one moment where the whole thing just crashes off course, but it's this steady slide. So what did you notice over the arc of your career, at Google, at Stripe? What are the things that you were seeing that was indicative to you that this slide is happening?
And to be clear, I think very highly of Google, and I think very highly of Stripe, and I almost uniformly, almost entirely, like there's a couple of like little bad apples kind of thing where people would say a thing where it's like, oh my God, is that really what you think? But the vast majority of people I worked with in all these organizations were truly some of the most impressive, collaborative, warm, compassionate people I've ever, like, it was amazing. And so these are like emergent factors that are not about, well, everyone became a bad apple. It was just the processes and incentive structures inherently led you to it. And the thing that nobody chose. And again, this is not a specific thing to either of these companies or even the tech industry in general. It's just endemic to the whole system that we live in currently. And so you would like, I've told this story in a few other places, but this is slightly stylized, but I'm kind of mashing together a few real stories. But yeah, I used to mentor hundreds of product managers at Google over the years. I just loved doing it. I grew a ton. I learned a ton. I helped people. It was just a thing I loved doing. And a few years before I left Google, someone came to me who was a junior product manager who was working in YouTube ranking, the ranking algorithm of how you rank recommendations. And she said, "Hey, Alex, hi, nice to meet you. I have a proposal to tweak ranking. We'd probably do 100 of those a year or something. And I don't want your thoughts on the proposal. I want your thoughts on how to get it shipped." And so I said, okay. So I kind of skimmed the proposal and then say, okay, what's your engineering manager think? What's your VP think? And they go, wait a second. Isn't the second order impact of this ranking change bad for the set of creators that we care about? Not like world endingly bad, but like, distinctly worse than the status quo. And isn't that bad for our users? Isn't that bad for Google? Isn't that bad for society? And she goes, who's to say? I said, well, you're the person who's saying we should do it. You should be the person to say, I think that this is a good thing. And she said, Alex, everybody knows that we have to goal is to increase watch time. If we don't increase watch time, it will go to the bad guys, TikTok, who are, don't even care about making it, enriching or good for society or whatever. And my manager told me recently that I'm in danger of missing expectations at my next performance review because I'm not moving metrics that matter. This will increase watch time. What do you want me to do? And that to me, I think is a nice little distillation of the forces behind all of this. Like if you went to like the CEO of Google and said, hey, this person is going to do this trade-off that will increase watch time at the cost of this other thing, they would say, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. But like the entire system does a thing that nobody wants. Nobody wants it. And that emerges.
Yeah, it's like everyone's optimizing, but for these sort of distorted goals over time that lead to ultimately the bad, bad outcomes for the user and perhaps over time for the company. I've heard you describe on a similar note, we're talking about emergence here and how organizations evolve. And I know you've got a bunch of interesting and pretty vivid metaphors and ideas about the ways in which organizations and teams work and this idea of emergence. And one of these is like this idea about slime molds. So tell me more about slime molds and emergence.
Yeah, I mean, the slime mold deck is without doubt the most lightning in a bottle piece of writing I've ever done in my career. And like someone asked me actually last night, I was talking at a dinner with a bunch of very smart tools for thought, creative people. And someone said, how do you make an idea go viral? And I said, no, that's backwards. What you do is you figure out your goals or the thing you're trying to say, and then you find a viral message that aligns with those goals. And so the slime mold thing totally emerged out of like discussions that lots of people were resonating with. And I just kept on putting more, gas on the fire and ended up building it into this whole deck or whatever. I think a slime mold deck is about emergence in that we feel the same hollowness in organizations where everyone's working harder than ever before, and yet less and less is getting done. Like, why is that? Everyone thinks, oh, someone secretly got, lazy, or it's a bunch of people that are only working on make work. They aren't really doing real productive work. And the fact of the matter is, just fundamentally, the number of people that have to coordinate goes up. The amount of effort goes up at a compounding rate. That's a fundamental characteristic. That's not even like a downstream of the physics of our universe. It's downstream of the physics of any universe. It must be so. And that leads to, by having that force be hidden that we don't even think about, it makes us all go crazy because it is a fundamental unstoppable force. It'd be like, what if we all pretended gravity doesn't exist? We'd go crazy. We'd be like, what the fuck is happening? Why can I not jump to the moon? I don't understand.
I mean, I hear you on that. I guess it's obviously not unique to tech, this idea that like coordination complexity increases with scale. But I'm curious if there's a part of it that you think is specific to the technology industry as a whole, or is it a universal theory for how organizations evolve as they grow?
I think it is a relatively universal theory. That's one of the things that's surprising to me when I published a public version of it and re-derived it from kind of memory to settle a bet with someone. And that was debating with about why organizations got slow. And people feel it all over the place. I think tech feels it more acutely than others because tech is able to be very fast paced in a way that is like, one of the reasons that tech is so able to be fast paced and have this very levered impact is because it turns out that manipulating bits is many orders of magnitude easier than manipulating atoms. And tech outside the hardware space doesn't have any atoms. It's just bits. So that means that like a good idea could scale very quickly, where it's very difficult to do that in a world where you have to like physically arrange the atoms and then like physically move them to the place and like store them and like make sure the user can see them before they buy them and then it's just way harder. And so tech can run way faster. It's the same dynamics that everybody else has. It's just like the most pure hyperspeed, fully in the like virtual realm kind of version of it. And so it's like the vanguard for what other environments experience.
Sure. And so the slime molds, for those who've not come across your deck and writing, included in the show notes. For people who are like, hold on, why are we talking about slime mold here? And like, what's the link? And they haven't quite joined the dots. Join the dots for them. So what is a slime mold? Why is a slime mold an appropriate analogy here for this kind of organizational emergence?
A slime mold is a type of organism that is lots of different single cell organisms that work together as a colony. And it can, despite having no central location, no central point of control, can exhibit shockingly nuanced behaviors. And it does this entirely emergently through just like very straightforward kinds of mechanics. And one of the reasons I called organizations a slime mold is, first of all, that frame of organizations are a slime mold. I knew for years before I even did the very first version of the deck whenever I say, yeah, organizations are kind of like a slime mold, everyone I said it to goes, because slime sounds like gross, but it's also like people are like, yeah, everyone who knows about slime molds, like, oh yeah, yes, absolutely. Organizations are like this emergent phenomena that no one really controls. And we pretend like we can, but it's kind of hard to. And so I think it's a apt combination just because it has that kind of like almost subversive air of like, look, I'm going to like point out that like organizations kind of suck. And they have fundamentally this like bottoms up, difficult to control emergence. And like by pointing out the thing that everyone can see, but no one's pointed out before, they go, ooh, he said it, but I'm doing it in a way that like nobody is. If you point out the emperor's wearing no clothes, the emperor's going to have your head cut off. If you point out that the gravity exists, like there's no one to cut off your head, right? Like it doesn't hurt anybody. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I mean, you've obviously spent a good chunk of your career working in those, these bigger organizations, the slime molds. You've been an inhabitant. You mentioned the disillusionment you feel today. So from your perspective, I'd be interested to know, like, do you think the organizations, those big organizations today, do you think that they can be course corrected and changed from the inside to operate differently, to reconnect with the kind of the ethical stance, the hackers mindset that you talked about? Or is it a question of like, no, we just need new organizations built in new ways that will like lead the charge of something new? Like how do you conceive of like the role of the incumbents now?
I think incumbents basically never go backwards. Like this process of ossification, cultural ossification, I think is almost entirely a one-way ratchet. I think it's like fundamentally true. Jeff West, who wrote the book Scale, is at SFI, and I've talked about this a bit, and I think that it's like a fundamental force of like you just ossify. The question is how quickly do you ossify? So I imagine the new things will be new AI native companies that can use this new electricity, this new input that is so insanely valuable in novel ways that change the behaviors and the laws of physics. So I imagine these companies will intrinsically be difficult to change them over time. And so new things will come up. I think, companies like Google and all these other ones, they'll exist for, decades. The question is, will they ever be at the vanguard? Will they ever be able to like regain it? You could argue that like Microsoft has had a significant cultural change in the last 10 years in a positive direction. You could argue how deep that is, but like it shows that it is possible under certain characteristics when the stars align to change some pretty fundamental cultural beliefs. And like Microsoft going from a company that was like saw open source and called it literally a cancer. I think they back in the 90s, I think they called it a cancer, and to like actually be one of the best open source contributors across all these crazy projects and stuff. Like, wow, that's cool. So it's possible, but I'm not holding my breath, I guess.
Yeah. I guess there's a reason now you're on the outside, right?
Yeah. And to be clear, I'm still very positive on these companies. I just think that there's more to be unlocked, more pro-social outcomes to be unlocked with tech. I am fundamentally an optimist. I think that technology is awesome. I think it's amazing. And I think it's a bummer that we become so cynical and so ossified and so centralized in the tech industry. And I think that it doesn't have to be that way. And I think the most fateful decision that was made in the tech industry ever, and this is a very strong statement, but let's go with it.
Let's go with it.
Let's go with it.
Come on.
And I think it was 1994 when the same origin policy was first described and distilled. And it was, I had to check my notes again and verify I got this right, but it was basically a hot fix. Netscape adds JavaScript. It goes, shit, people can take someone else's cookies and send them elsewhere. What should we do? And so they're like, okay, we need to partition. Clearly. But the question is, where do you partition it? Like, where do you draw the line? The domain is not exactly right because there's certain examples where the subdomains are actually kind of notionally separate partitions. And so this notion of the origin was created that's like slightly different than just the domain. And then now you have that little wall, kind of. And now when you add additional things that need to be partitioned, where do you add it? I don't know, just use the wall that's already there. And so you build it up a little bit more. And then you keep on adding more and more stuff, and the wall gets very large. And then the App Store comes along, or iOS and Android app models, and they go, yeah, let's do that. Let's make all software like this. And it leads to a really weird environment where the app controls the data, and you have to trust the app with that data in some open-ended way, which is a pretty big thing to do. And so that fundamentally leads to centralization. Data flows into silos easier than it flows out. And you end up getting these extremely over aggregated silos that, sort of take all this data and make it so nobody else can do anything with it. And all of this is downstream of the same origin paradigm. The same origin paradigm goes, it would be dangerous if your data could flow across different bits of code. So we will simply not allow that. And that's reasonable. It's a totally reasonable thing to say. And it's been, in some ways, was a very clever decision because it is one simple model that can then be extended for decades and has produced all the great things we have around us. The problem is, what did we lose in that? Like, what are the things that are not possible? Like, here's a scenario that is literally impossible to imagine in the same origin paradigm. Imagine I go to potterybarn.com, and as soon as I get there, it says, hey, I want to get access to I want to know if you're doing a remodel or if you're like, sort of renovating your house. Like, is it like are you doing one thing or are you doing a big project? So I want to look at your notes on that. I want to look at your private pins on Pinterest to see like what your mood board is, like what's your style. I want to have a picture of your living room so I get a sense of what you're trying to redo. And I also want to know like how much you spend on furniture, like how much did you spend in the last 5 years, and like what's your income. I, as a user, if it asked me for all these things, I would say, are you insane? Of course not. No, my God. But imagine a world where it could have those things. It could have a thing that says, by the way, if you get this information, here's how you should assemble it into a recommendation with our catalog to render a picture of your living room with the style we think best matches your style, fits in your price range, and does what you want. And you can see above it and say, here are the inputs it use. You use your income, you use this, you use this. And I can say, oh, you know what? Get rid of the income thing. And then maybe it generates another suggestion. You go, actually, no, I don't want the IKEA stuff. I want the nicer stuff. So like put back in the income. That's fine. And Pottery Barn, meanwhile, knows nothing about any of these data. Right? But now I have produced value for me of like, I now have really good recommendations. I can visualize them very directly and say, ooh, that looks great. Like that's exactly, it's my style. That's impossible to imagine in the same origin paradigm. It's just too creepy because data is fundamentally has to be shared with someone who you should not share it with, like all that sensitive data. And so we don't even consider it. So this never even comes up as a thing that should exist,
So to trace it back, the same origin is like, as you put it, this kind of hotfix that goes out that sounds like it had it was a security kind of decision about like where, to kind of protect data, and the inadvertent outcomes of that is it becomes this kind of architectural norm for the internet, whereby data kind of like lives in these separate silos with individual companies and is kind of like locked away by Apple or Google or whoever else you're using for whatever service you're using.
Yeah. And I want to make a stronger claim, which is a lot of the like crazy stuff that's happened in society in the last, 15 years and like bizarre things happening in politics that are pretty clearly bad for society and like is super hollowed out, I think are downstream of this. That's a very strong claim. It's sort of in an indirect claim, but I do think our modern political environment is downstream of the same origin paradigm. And I think had we somehow come up with a different model back then, which I don't think actually was possible. I think it's possible now. I don't think it was possible then because they were missing a whole bunch of things and cryptography was too expensive and whatever. But like now it is possible. We might be in a very different world where we don't assume that you have these like engagement maximizing hyper aggregators that are very easy to sway and to sort of have these political messages that some foreign adversary can invest a shockingly small amount of money and like sway a national decision. I think that would not have happened. I mean, that's a strong claim. I don't know if I had to think through it, but like it's occurred to me that might be the case. We just see these kinds of hollowness all over the place that comes from this massive centralization, and that centralization in tech. Ben Thompson talks about aggregators, his frame of like aggregator, by the way, is just a polite word for a specific peculiar kind of monopoly, in that it creates a thing where the aggregator is basically nowhere else to go. There's a network effect. As more users use it, it gets better. And so why would you leave? But also you can't leave. And so Ben Thompson kind of has this like, well, whatever, like that's good and businesses can make a lot of money from it. It's like, okay, but like, is that normatively good for society? Is that the model that we want? Is that the thing that unlocks the most value for society, for people and for businesses and for society in general? And the answer to me, I don't think it is. It also is, to some degree, aggregation is downstream of the same origin paradigm. Like it wouldn't aggregate nearly as quickly if you didn't have the same origin paradigm, if it weren't built into silos.
So just to kind of like map out my understanding of Alex's theory of the world here is you have this same origin paradigm decision that gets made that essentially becomes architecture for the internet around how data is sort of housed, and that enables this like data aggregation. So you have these huge companies that basically swallow up all of our data, and it's that data in cumulative data that's been collected that then enables the kind of more distorting effects you alluded to around like political decisions, kind of weirdness in the world, conspiracy theory, whatever.
And just people getting supercharged, like controversies and like people just yelling at each other all the time is downstream of that kind of centralization. Yeah, that is roughly my, like what I'm asserting.
Okay, let's talk about resonance and hollowness. Hollowness is this word I've heard you use, and then resonance is kind of the contrast. So tell me a little bit more about the distinction between the two, and what is it that's important about resonance?
The distinction between the two. So one of them leaves you feeling regret. One of them leaves you feeling nourished. And the test for whether something is resonant is, as you look at it more carefully, as you peel back the layers, as you consider it more deeply, every little incremental bit, do you feel like a little bit like betrayed by it, or do you feel more love? Do you feel more nourished by it? And if you keep on, as you peeling it back, go, like that's bad. Like that's hollow. That's not resonant. So it's like this resonance is a fractal alignment across the layers. All the layers are aligned in some meaningful way that gives it some emergent quality that is bigger than the sum of its parts. And so like that to me is like the definition of resonance. Resonance it comes from Christopher Alexander, who's an architect, actually lived a few blocks away from me, it turns out, when I realized after reading his book, that talks about the quality without a name. Some spaces just feel alive. They feel like somewhere that you want to be and that you feel proud to be in them. And you feel like you're, a cafe in an old courtyard at night with bistro lighting and someone playing guitar over the thing. It's just like, you go, yes, wow. Like, of course, that's what a space that you want to be in. And he called this, you can use different words. I think resonance is the best word for it, frankly. And so that was why we chose the word resonance, to capture this kind of deep, nourishing thing, something that you would proudly recommend to a friend, even after you're sober. So like, if you're like playing Candy Crush, like, oh, this is so great. Your friend asks, should I play it? You go, yeah, I love it. But then like a week later, after you stop playing it, would you proudly recommend it to a friend, to someone you care about, or no? And if not, it's not resonant.
Yeah. Well, where I live in the Basque Country on the border of France and Spain, and so yeah, there's lots of those resonant courtyards you describe. I know the feeling. Are there examples you have outside of the courtyard space? Are there examples you have of tools, products that you feel that resonance for today?
I think today there aren't that many. I think they're typically in cozy spaces. They're typically, like human scale. When we scale to massive things, we have to distill, we have to compress, we have to lose nuance and make it average. And resonance is wrinkled. It's fractally situated in a particular context. So like resonant experiences today are typically in those kind of cozy environments. I don't think it's, by the way, fundamentally in tension with scale. I think now with LLMs in particular, it is possible to create scaled resonant experiences in a way that was difficult to before. To me, it's like, when you're having a resonant experience in your bones, like you just feel warmed by it, and you feel like you'll remember this forever, or it's the kind of place that you want to wish the whole world could be like this. And it's hard to describe that. And the challenge is resonance is very, very hard to distill into numbers, which is one of the reasons we don't optimize it for it. The closest thing would be something like, Net Promoter Score is kind of the simplest, like the most operationalized version of it. But a week later, would you proudly recommend this to someone you care about, is the closest test for resonance.
Okay. So there's this kind of abstract, like, know it when you see it, feel it in your bones, quality to resonance.
Yeah.
But I know you are the co-creator of what you call the Resonant Computing Manifesto. So what are the other attributes, should we say, of resonance?
So I'd say resonance in general has that overall characteristic of, it's not hollowing out. It's not just being optimized. It is something that feels whole and nourishing. The computing environment in particular, we enumerate 5 different characteristics. One, it's private. You have stewardship over your own data, and it's used in ways that align with your interests and expectations. 2, it is dedicated. The system doesn't have a conflict of interest. It's subtly optimizing to get you to click more ads or whatever. It's helping you do the things that you want to do as an extension of your agency. 3, it is plural, which is to say there's no centralized bits of power or entities that have an undue amount of power in the system. There's alternatives, there's competition, there's this kind of fluidity. 4 is adaptive. It's open-ended, that you can use it in ways none of the creators anticipated. And so it doesn't box you in. It kind of lifts you up. and 5 is pro-social. The outcomes help you embed in harmony with the world around you and the society around you. Some other visions that are like, crypto, I think, for example, has some of these characteristics, is loses something because it's like, okay, everyone's an island and you don't have to trust anybody else. You can just do your own thing. It's like, well, society is a tapestry. We're all woven into this tapestry. It's impossible to separate it from us. So like, we should do a good job at being in a tapestry together.
So that's the pro-social element versus the kind of every man's an island perspective.
Yeah.
I guess one question I have around this. So, I mean, I love the manifesto, and I would, again, I'll include a link in the show notes. I would recommend people go and read what you guys have created there. I guess this idea of centralization versus decentralization, what do you think kind of determines like which direction we head in a kind of, capitalist economy as it stands today? Can a more decentralized approach kind of win as a strategy, in your point?
I think it can. But I think the thing that's missing, which is implied, I'm going to connect the dot. I think what's missing is we need to transcend the same origin paradigm. The same origin paradigm traps us in the thing that we're in. And I'm not saying get rid of the same origin paradigm. I'm saying we need to extend and add onto and have other models in addition to the same origin paradigm. And I believe that if you do this properly, that you can create a by default resonant experience. In the same way, I would say like the early web was kind of a default resonant experience. You could create a new web kind of moment. The web, what it did at the beginning was the revolution was the internet is the way that, the interconnect of data and fiber lines, very capital intensive, and the web was an optional little shitty open source thing on top that you could choose to use that had radically different laws of physics inside of itself for how content could be distributed. And that catalyzed a whole new resonant open ecosystem. And I think we're missing that same kind of moment to catalyze this potential energy of LLMs.
What is it about LLMs and this moment that makes that such a critical need? Like, what's your connection between the two?
I think LLMs are as important as the printing press, electricity, and the internet. I think that they're just extraordinarily powerful. They are truly a new kind of thing that enables all kinds of things that we previously were just impossible to do are now possible. I think we're seeing like 10% of what they can do. We're like, oh, it's a chatbot. No. Chatbot actually is, I think, one of the worst applications of it because it very quickly lulls you into this feeling of, oh, it's my friend. It's not your friend. It's created by a corporation. It doesn't have an internal mental model. And like whatever their incentives are or what it's going to do for you. I think, of course, chat is a feature, not a paradigm to me. I expect that chat will show up in lots of different interfaces. It will not be the only interface, and it won't be like there's a single chatbot that you use to do everything. So I think large language models can write code on demand. That's crazy. That's insane. So like it can write little bits of software. You can have infinite software. When you have infinite software sort of fades away. You don't think about, like, I'm going to go ka-chunk and use this app. Your data just comes alive. It just does the things that you wanted to do organically without you even have to do very much. Like, that's wild. That is so different from how software has worked before in a world where software is expensive. And I think there's so much that we can do with LLMs that we are just at the very beginning and unlocking this power and this potential.
I mean, I can see I firstly obviously agree with you in terms of there is huge potential here, and I guess with that potential, LLMs have a capability to work with data in a way that is just new and different and fundamentally more powerful. I guess what I'm curious about, the Resonant Computing Manifesto, I read it, there's a lot there that I'm like, yes, I totally agree with this. And I still don't know the path forward. I still don't know.
But that's part of, I think the path forward is Stephen Levy made a post a few months ago that said, where did the Silicon Valley that I know, where did it go? It was idealistic and it's a hacker ethic and it's gone. It's cynical. It's, engagement maxing. And I don't think it is gone. I think it just scattered. Like if you talk to any individual person, they want to do this kind of thing. Like when you talk to them about Resonance, what they needed was a way to describe it. They needed a word that other people also understand. They can say, yeah, that's what we're going for. That's what we're missing. So I do think that if you have lots of people that now have, boom, a thing that everyone can talk to and knows what that word means, and it means something that everyone agrees is good, everyone agrees we should optimize, that we should create more of, I think that can lead to an emergent force of like, imagine if every PM across Silicon Valley and where people were launching stuff or coming up with anything, just asking, is this resonant? Like just that single question, and people go, "Oh, you're right. This is kind of like doing a thing that's like good for the user and like what the user wants, but like not what they want to want. Like that one check, just putting in a little bit of balance with, I don't know, make number go up, I think would be really powerful. And two, I do believe that it is, I mean, I'm talking my book here, but I believe I'm the company that I co-founded with this radically different privacy model. Fundamentally, I believe is a thing that will usher in resonant computing by default. And I think the reason I got here is it's not that we came up with the idea and then said, okay, let's back out. Like, what is the characteristics it has? For the last 10 years, the idea of resonance has been bouncing around in my head as a fundamental thing for humanity to talk about and create more of. And then it's like, okay, so how do you use tech to create the most resonance you can in society? And the answer is a different privacy model. So like we got to it because of starting from what's the pro-social way to unlock the potential of tech, you know?
Yeah, so you got the idealism, and yeah, like you say, sometimes like something just needs to kind of name the moment, and it needs to be that thing that people can like point to, you know, and we can, I guess, name examples. It was like, I don't know, when Paul Graham wrote that like founder mode essay, a bunch of founders like, yeah, I'm just doing founder mode now, and it was like this thing that they could
I'm not an asshole, I'm just doing founder mode. So got it. Okay,
exactly,
cool.
Right? And when like a bunch of like 25-year-old girls are like having a kind of summer at Coachella or other festivals, they're like, I'm doing my brat summer, like Charlie XCX said, you know? And so, yeah, I guess to your point, this resonance as a term, I think can catch on. But yeah, I guess one element seems to be this kind of privacy model. And I'd love to spend a little bit more time talking about that in just a moment. I guess the other thing beyond like the privacy model, I'm in the process, I can't, maybe you're pre-reading this book as well, I'm not sure, but there is a well-known figure in the world of tech who right now has a sort of draft book that is not public and therefore...
I think, is this about long-termism?
Yes, yeah, I think...
In structure, in like organizations?
In corporate structure.
Yeah, okay, yes, love this book. I love it. I think it's so good. I think it's incredibly important. I've facilitated a book club for him to get a bunch of interesting readers on it. I think I've shared it with like 40 readers for him of people who I thought would be really impacted by it. I think it's a phenomenally important book.
So whilst we can't name like what the book is, who it's written by, I guess the other component here, and I think to me this book captures that really nicely, is we need to have organizational structures that support the ability to build in a different way. Because I guess what this book is pointing to is a whole bunch of examples of, yeah, it's one thing to sort of set out with this idealism, but there's kind of this like gravitational force within the way we sort of structure organizations today that mean at some point, probably post-IPO, for example, you know, the founder gets kicked out because the market cares about profit and profit only, and suddenly they're kind of this thing that grew big because it had this heart and this idealism sort of gets deconstructed from what it once was. So in my head, at least, as I'm joining these dots, I'm kind of thinking about like, yeah, the name the moment, there's the privacy model, and then there's kind of these structures that would need to be in place to be able to realize.
So this unnamed person actually advised on how we set up the corporate structure of our company.
Amazing.
So like because we explicitly wanted, or like tell it. And in fact, it's funny reading the book. I was like, oh, you gave me this like the 40-minute version of this when you were advising on the company, and like I see it now in book form that other people can also get that advice. It was very powerful. I think it's one of the key insights in this kind of. First of all, what I like about this overall thing that we're talking about is a lot of people are like, you can't have tech is bad, and so, or you can't have growth is bad. No, growth and tech are good. It's like, how do you put them to good ends? And what I love about this book and this approach is this notion of like, it's a resonant model. It's good for the users. It's good for the shareholders. It's good for the company. It's good for society. Like all of these things can be true, you know? And like, this is not like, oh, you shouldn't make profit. No, profit properly considered also nets out the externalities. The externalities are intrinsically difficult to incorporate, like almost by definitions, almost tautological. And, so like, but when you do, is this creating more value in the world than it is extracting? And if it is, go for it, man. And it's hard because you can't trade off, like different externalities have different trade-off costs. You have to figure out, it would be basically impossible to operationalize this in some like fully bean counter spreadsheet kind of way, because it's like almost intrinsically, definitionally challenging. But another thing in this that I love is this notion of no country allows tourists to vote. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like the tourists are only there for like a week. And if the tourists could vote and say, hey, it'd be great is during this week only, if all of the budget for the country were put into having a big fun party with my favorite artist and whatever, like that would be insane. Like, of course, that's dumb. And so if you had a thing, for example, imagine a thought experiment. Imagine that all the owners of the equity of a given company, current owners, are all going to sell it in 3 months, every single one of them. And they're going to sell it to new people. Actually, wait, maybe this doesn't fully work. And just imagine that they're going to leave in 3 months, and if they did it all coordinated, this wouldn't work. But yeah, just imagine they're going to leave in 3 months, and everyone is going to leave in 3 months. None of them realize this. Maybe that's the key. Okay, that's the key. What they would do is they'd say, "Hey, take this thing and like just maximize the profits. Just burn out everything, sell off all the all of the real estate, whatever. Just maximize this, wring this sucker dry in these 3 months before I get out." If everyone secretly did that at the same time, you would destroy the company. And it would be gone because the long-term interest of the company, the future profit potential, you don't care if you aren't going to hold this equity after 3 months. And the reason that doesn't happen today is that kind of happenstance of people have different time horizons that overlap. But structurally, there is a pull towards short time horizons. So like the only thing you're allowed to optimize for is fiduciary duty to your shareholders. And public equity's default amount of like time they're held now is like 3 months or something. Those are tourists. I was talking with someone last night about public benefit corporations, and they were curious about it. And my understanding is, the default charter for a C corp is you got to maximize fiduciary duty to your shareholders, which means if there's a trade-off that you think won't be good for the shareholders, but will be good for this other thing, there's basically you aren't allowed to trade it off. Someone could theoretically sue you. Whereas in a public benefit corporation, there's an explicit other goal that is, maximizing the pro-social impacts of this technology on society or blah, 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 whatever. And this allows you now to say there's a thing that you have to balance. And so now you can say, listen, in the charter of this thing that's formally recognized, we have I have to balance these two forces. And in this case, an infinitesimal gain here is not worth the considerable loss over here. And so we aren't going to do it. And that just gives you the cover to be able to actually do these kinds of decisions without someone go, I wanted that infinitesimal gain in profits.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess what we're touching on here is just when something is hard to measure, kind of inevitably becomes hard to optimize for. And, resonance, pro-social impacts, whatever we want to, talk about here is inevitably harder to measure than the kind of bean counter number goes up, number goes down. And that feels like part of the issue here. And also people just distort these metrics and take them to mean something they never were. One example of this is like GDP, which we take as this kind of universal measure now of like economic, growth. Everyone's tuned in to what are our growth numbers. Simon Kuznets, who invents GDP as a measure of basically managing post-war recovery. Like, how is the economy doing right now, given that we've just been through this horrific war? And kind of the one thing he says is you should never, ever use this as a sole measure of economic welfare. Like, that would be a catastrophic thing to do. And what do we do today? We use GDP pretty much as a sole measure of like economic welfare. And I guess the same is true of this of profit, as a thing to maximize. I guess just to then jump into the privacy bit of this, because that's clearly where you guys at Common Tools are spending so much time. Like, what is it you can share in a public...
I can share abstractly about a lot of it. I mean, what we're doing is we want to get a new open decentralized ecosystem where Common Tools is just one of the players. Like, that's a very fundamental characteristic of the design of the thing. So it's funny, people say, oh, Alex, nobody cares about privacy. First of all, I think people actually do care about privacy. It's just in this world where you basically don't have any choices in it. Like, cynically, you just go, whatever, screw it. I guess I'll take I'm not going to get privacy anyway, so I might as well just take this other thing. But second of all, what I'm describing is that people won't use this thing that we're describing because it's private. They will use it because it allows them to do open-ended, useful things to them that's impossible in other systems. And the reason that's possible is because of the privacy model. So the privacy model is the enabler, not the reason that people will use it. And that's a key distinction, because I can see this leverage point so clearly from decades of working on privacy and security models and open ecosystems. I can say, aha, down here, that's the leverage point that we zigged and we could have zagged. But like most other people, even as this thing becomes as broadly used as the web, in 5 years, people won't talk about the privacy model. They don't care. That's not the reason they will use it. It's just the reason that it will work is the privacy model.
Yeah. Yeah. So the privacy model is what opens up these kind of better experiences. Although I do ask myself these days, I guess maybe like 2-3 years ago, I would have had exactly the same conclusion that like nobody cares about privacy or there's a small number of people in the world who care about privacy in a very direct way, and that's probably always going to stay the same. I guess in the current state of like what feels like geopolitical instability in the world, it does feel like it's becoming more and more of a crowd who care just about like privacy for privacy's sake. But yeah, I do take your point that actually probably the majority of people, it's just, is the experience, is what I can do here just fundamentally different and better as a result of this model versus.
And why not both? As in, like, I'll take it. The people who like, hey, here's the thing that like this is what is a resonant privacy model? A resonant privacy model is one where you don't have to think about it, and the closer you do think about it, the more you're like, oh, I didn't even think to care about that thing, but that's good. I like that, and like that's what I want, a resonant privacy model where you don't have to think about it, but the more you think about it, the more you're going to like it. And that I think is the goal. The system should have that kind of characteristic. If you, my husband, for example, is very privacy conscious, and you know, for a while he didn't even let me use Google Photos because he didn't want his picture to be in Google Photos training data, and I had to prove to him that that was like explicitly forbidden from the, you know, public statements the creators of Google Photos had made. I remember a few years ago when I was still on Chrome, and he's very technical, but like not like an engineer. He was an IT guy, and he was just, over the course of a dinner, it's like, okay, tell me how like third-party cookies work. Like, tell me how cookies work. Tell me how. And as we unpacked each layer and described how it worked and how we got there, why it does that thing, both of us were like, oh God, ew, how did we get here? You know? And I was like, of course, here's incrementally how we got here. He's like, yeah, but doesn't it suck? And it's like, oh, yeah, it does. It does. It's not good. And so that's the opposite of a resonant privacy model.
Yeah. I guess, Alex, as I look at your public writing and kind of get to understand a little bit of how you think about the world, there are pieces out there, podcast appearances you've done, things you've talked about that seem very much about the organizational structure and team structure, and slime molds, as we touched on, is one example of that. And then in kind of the resonant computing realm, I guess we're also talking about the nature of the technology that we build. So it's kind of like organizational structure, there's like what we're building. What is your theory about the overlap between those two things? I guess we've kind of touched on it a little bit with talk of this book and sort of corporate structures, but what are the team organizational theories that are going to lead to the resonant computing outcome that we're talking about here?
Yeah, it's funny. If I had to look back and like make sense of these themes that have been like, if I could go back and just whisper two words in my ear, kind of all the way back when I started thinking about this kind of stuff. And I remember actually I read the book, Stephen Johnson's book, Emergence, I think it's called, when I was in right before I started college, and it was about Stimmergy and emergence and these systems of like how you get these like bottoms up coherent outcomes, and it blew my brain. At that summer at the beach, I like stayed in. I didn't really go out to the beach very often, and I was making a little ant colony simulator to like really play with the emergent characteristics and whatever. I remember very distinctly that summer walking on the beach with my sister and saying, Susan, I think I'm on the cusp of something extremely important, and I don't know what it is. Now, 15 years later, I can look back on it and be like, oh, okay, two words, the things that like define everything that I care about: emergence and resonance. And the emergence is the fundamental process of these things that show up, and like under what conditions do the good things emerge, and how can you tweak the kind of fundamental local laws to lead to these emergent outcomes. And resonance is kind of the why or the what or the thing that like I've always been searching for in everything I do. One of the things I try to do as a moral thing is every decision I make, I try to imagine, even small ones. Like, you know, like this morning, I just washed my hands briefly coming to this. That's why I was a minute late. And the hand towel dropped to the floor, and I was late. And so I was like, oh, I just got to go. I'm just going to leave it. And then I thought, wait, is this the world I want to live in? That people, when they drop the hand towel on the floor, don't put it back for the thing? No, it's not. I can be an additional 3 seconds later and also like do the kind of thing I want other people in the world to also do. Like, that's a micro example. But like, to me, the test is, if for any decision, every micro decision, imagine if this were a decision, a video of this were to be shown to a lot of people I care about in 10 years, you know, my husband, my parents, my role models, my ancestors, would I be at the very least not embarrassed and ideally actively proud of that decision? And if not, then don't do it. Like that's and that's that kind of principle I try to live by as much as possible. I am a human being. I'm imperfect. I make a number of things where I realize that was really not aligned with, like, I'm not proud of that thing that I just did. But like, I think as a North Star, it's really powerful. And that gets at that kind of fractal alignment of different layers, gives you that resonance and gives you something that feels important for society and everything else. So I don't know, does that make sense? Is that
It does. And I think that kind of moral substance, if we want to call it that, is what to go back to your discussion about like what we've lost in Silicon Valley, like it is exactly that. It feels like it is the people sitting around and saying, not just can we build it, but like, how do we build it with those ideals in mind? How do we tap into, whether it's the hacker's mindset or it's picking towels up off the floor so that your husband doesn't shout at you.
What a silly example, but
no, great example. It's a great example. No, because it needs to permeate at all levels. So I think it's a great example. Maybe there's something here, maybe there's not. The thing where my mind is going is like, okay, if the two words for Alex are about emergence and resonance, now part of the characteristic of emergence is it's not a controllable thing. You can't just top down
not directly. Not
directly, exactly. So, but what I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the link between the two? Like, does emergence lead to resonance? And of course, and that's kind of a dumb question, because emergence can head off in all of these different directions. So maybe the better question is like, how, if organizations are emergent, what are the things we need to do to try and influence that emergent system that makes resonance the
I don't know. I think there's certain things that make it easier to live in a resonant way. That I was talking to, this is also slightly stylized and combining a few people, someone from Meta a few years ago, and someone was debating me and they said, Alex, despite what people say, our metrics are very clear. People love doom scrolling. It's like, that's not love, man. That's like, right? Like,
that's addiction. That's
addiction.
Yeah.
So I think when you're in a system that is optimized to get you to hyper engage, that's not that's hard to do things aligned with your principles. When you're at like when you go to a conference and they've got a bunch of donuts and pastries and whatever, and you're trying to not eat desserts, it's hard to not eat the dessert, right? Like, it's easier for me to not purchase desserts in the home than to like be invited and have people like, ooh, you should have some. No, really, they're really good. Like, just stop it, go away. It's so like so you can create situations and characteristics that I think have this. It can make it easier, or context can make it easier or harder to live in a resonant way, right?
And to use your dessert eating analogy, a lot of people who eat dessert feel immediately more guilty if someone else at the table says no. Like, a lot of people don't like to drink alone, So I'm curious, given that you are very much, in terms of a chapter of your career, you're very much of Silicon Valley, certain companies, etc., as you have got noisier about, quote unquote, not eating dessert or pointing to some things that are alternatives. How have you found the response of your network and the people around you?
Very positive, actually, in that, because I'm not saying anybody is bad or evil or whatever. I'm just pointing out this thing that I think everybody feels. And I'm not saying you made bad decisions. I'm saying in the emergent incentive structures of this industry based on the same origin paradigm and the optimization ratchet, like, this is where we ended up. And it's more just like, hey guys, we all feel a little bit like zombies, right? Like, we all feel a little bit dead inside. Like, maybe if we didn't, like, what if we weren't zombies anymore? And so it's not saying, it's very important to me to not say, I think, in fact, actually, some people, by the way, I really deeply respect, refuse to sign on to the manifesto because they said, you don't go hard enough against people who have made these bad and greedy decisions. And you make it sound like, oh, oopsies, I just fell into the thing that made me a whole bunch of money and like was bad for society. Like, whoops, like, can I get a ball again? And I think it's very important that we allow people to recognize when, they've taken actions, that when they like take a look up and realize that they were zombie shuffling forward, to like, come join us in the people who are looking around, who are these thoughtful, we always reframe thoughtful technologists. I love that. Let's make it so that people feel welcomed to being thoughtful technologists as opposed to shamed for not being it.
Yeah. And I think if there's anything we can learn from the moment of like the last however many years politically, etc., is like if you shame people on the kind of outside whatever tent you're in, then it doesn't make the tent a more welcoming place to come in.
Yeah.
So I like that ethos. Alex, we've covered a lot of ground here, and I'm fascinated by the many dots we've joined. I guess maybe a good place to focus the end of the conversation here is really about your optimistic view of the future. Obviously, you're working on some pretty specific topics with common tools. Yeah, fast forward me however far into the future you feel is appropriate, 5, 10 years, 20 years, I don't know, lifetime. Like, what is it that you would hope to see in the world? What is it that you would hope that your work had contributed to that?
I hope that I'm just one person who, has these strong ideals and cares about a lot of that stuff. My hope is that, at the right leverage points, like very small actions can lead to other people really joining in and participating and doing something that's way, way, way bigger than I could ever hope to do as an individual. I think it just looks like, I think technology is the kind of thing that should help us should be embedded in our lives in a way that feels cozy, aligned with our interests, that helps us be the person that we want to be, that makes it easier to do the things that we want to do, like that we want to do. And so I just think little things like here's a stupid little example. My husband is allergic to nightshades, which is a very weird allergy. I think it's way more common than people realize it is, but it's a weird allergy where you can't have eggplants. Okay. You can't have peppers. You can't have potatoes or tomatoes. And so friends of ours who care very deeply about us will have us over to their house and they'll say, oh, I remembered that Daniel can't eat tomatoes. So I made gnocchi. So close, and very thoughtful of them. But I'm sure they would love to, when they learn that Daniel has a nightshades allergy, a system that's their sort of operating system for their life says, oh, your shopping list, you add this recipe to the shopping list for this week. On Thursday, you're having the Komoroskes over. Just remember, Daniel can't eat that. It's just is that, and oh crap, you're right, I forgot the potatoes part. Okay. Those kinds of things that help you align with the kinds of be intentional and be thoughtful in ways that are very easy to forget in the modern world. I would love to have little help to be a thoughtful friend and supportive of other people and their goals and whatever. I don't know. I feel like that today takes so much effort to do, that we're just lost feeling bad about how little we do to do thoughtful things that help other people in our lives thrive,
Well, it feels like a good place to kind of bring us towards an end here. Anything you've not been asked or golden nuggets that are coming to mind that feel worth mentioning before we wrap up?
And I guess just, again, I think optimism and idealism, those are good. And we can have those again, like a society, and let's be optimistic and let's work to make the world a better place. I think it's way more achievable than we think. Luckily, LLMs as a reset moment of you have this widely destabilizing for technology kind of force of things that are so different that change the cost structures in such a way. Cool. If we're going to have to rebuild a whole bunch of stuff, it's all going to be reborn. Let's make it reborn in the image that we want. Let's bring back that hacker ethic. This is not about a revolution of something new. It's about coming home to the thing we've already done. This is already in the DNA of the industry. When I talk to people across the industry, people all still care about this, almost to every single one. So let's just do it, man. Now is the time. So
yeah. It's an important rallying cry, and as you say, I feel like the same is true in my network, right? You're naming a thing that a lot of people feel here, rather than trying to convince people of something that they've not already felt, sensed, and seen around them. So, yeah, I hope a world of resonant computing becomes the new norm that we all live in.
Yeah, and I think LLMs as an opportunity for a new system to be born, because it has to be a new technological system. Let's make it have the ideals that we want it to.
Let's make it better. Okay, Alex. And if people want to get in touch with you, learn more about your work, understand where you are online, anything to say about where people should find you?
I have my Komoroske.com is where I publish essays and stuff. And then I have a little mailing list that's linked to from that, where I send whenever there's a new podcast or a new post or something. And I do weekly reflections I send there too. So it gets 20 pages of whatever's on my mind. And you've been seeing me take notes in this conversation of things that will be in next week's bits and bobs. But that is, following along on that is the best way to stay in tune with where this particularly weird brain is going.
I've read a little bit of your bits and bobs docs, and yeah, I wouldn't describe it as weird, but I can definitely see that you're someone who has like a lot of thinking about the world. It's like supercharged. I'm not sure I could churn out as much on such a regular basis.
Yeah, it's one of those things of like, I just, for whatever reason, I can't help myself. I just love talking and thinking and distilling, and so I might as well do it in public, I guess. I don't know. Like someone at one point was like, "Oh, Alex, if you did it this way, you would get a lot more readers." I said, "Oh, you misunderstand. I'm doing this for me." And it's like, and I do it publicly so other people, if they want, can like benefit from it if there's anything in there, and also so I can sort of keep myself honest of like, I feel like I'd let down people if I didn't do it every Monday. And otherwise, if I lost this streak, oh my God, I would never get it back. It takes so much effort to do it, So
how long is the streak, out of interest?
So I'd actually done it. It's an outgrowth of the thing I did at the last company I was at. Oddly, it's evolved and grown into something very different than what it started as. But so I've been doing that for now, I think 5 years or so. It's been public. I've been working on them in my own time and doing them publicly for maybe 2.5 years or so. I'm now on my third Google Doc because I've run out. Like when you get to pass a few thousand pages, it stops working, and so you got to make a new one.
I didn't even know that was possible.
It is. Believe me, I've run into it multiple times. And when you do it, you paste in a big chunk of text, and it just goes burp, 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 error, refresh the page. Like, what? And like you try to do it, error, refresh the page. Like that means you're hitting the limit, and it can no longer add to the document, and you need to do a new one. Just FYI.
Completed a Google Doc. Awesome. Well, Alex, I really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time and for sharing. Yeah, it feels like a lot of unique insights that a lot of dots to connect that others might not. So yeah, really appreciate you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.